Yes. Mr. Craig Flood, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today.
Thanks, George.
And for being a good human being and my friend. I appreciate you.
How long have we known each other?
Okay, Craig and I met in 2012. The reason I know that, I think it was September 2012. The reason I remember that date is because it was at a filmmaking workshop hosted by a company called Still Motion, Emmy award-winning production company that was hosting a workshop on storytelling oriented a lot towards wedding,
And
the
we
wedding
met in the
film
audience?
industry. Yeah, and Craig and I met after the workshop, or maybe it was like during the workshop break. Craig was already doing wedding films, and I was just kind of getting my start in all things video production, filmmaking. And yeah, Craig was a super nice person because he invited me to stay in touch and kind of ask any questions about things, video production or wedding filmmaking. And you then invited me to help out with a wedding that you were filming.
Which was, I think, the first wedding you ever attended.
That was the first
Right?
wedding I ever attended,
I
yeah.
remember
And I
that.
was also helping with the film production on it, which was super fun.
Oh my gosh. What wedding was that? Do you remember? My memory is horrible.
I'm not sure, but I know that the groom had a backwards baseball cap on, and they were wearing like Jordans for the groom's party. So that was super fun.
Up in Puyallup?
It was somewhere in Washington. Yeah, it was definitely somewhere in Washington.
You shot that wedding with me?
I helped with part of it.
That would have been Dane Miller.
What was the wife's name?
Erica.
Yeah, Dane and Erica. That's definitely
Dude,
it.
I had no idea you were on that with me.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah.
So backtracking, but the fun story there is that Craig and I met at this filmmaking workshop, but then we ended up staying in touch. Craig continued to kind of give me insights on all things video production with wedding and whatnot, but then he let me know about a internship that was being hosted by the film production company that hosted the workshop that I ended up applying for and then ended up turning into like a full-time job at Still Motion, where I worked for about 2 years, and that was really because of Craig.
Which I think probably grew huge connections for you and put you on the track you're on now.
Oh,
Would that
yeah,
be
yeah,
safe to
totally.
say?
So
I remember that now.
good memories back then and now too.
Jeez Louise, so much time
Cheers.
has passed. That's so crazy. It feels like a lifetime ago.
Yeah. And Craig, you and your wife Nicole both live in Portland, and that's like where you guys were living when we met, but then it's also still where you live now. And I think at that time actually like Nicole was helping with some of the film production stuff that you were working on.
Then.
Yeah.
Or maybe she was pregnant.
Awesome.
And now we have 3 kids, 4th kid on the way.
A 4th kid on the way?
Yeah.
Oh, hell yeah. Double tap.
My birthday was December 16th, and my wife told me as a gift, she gave me a little poem. I was like, oh, that's funny. And I read the poem. I wish I had it on me now, but essentially it's like pretty much saying when our 3 turned into 4 or our 5 turned into 6.
Amazing.
Our family of 5 turned into 6. So yeah, 4th on the way.
What do you want to talk about today?
I've lived in wedding videography since 2011.
Do you know how many couples you've worked with?
No
like,
idea.
If you had to guess.
I can't. Well, 2011, I maybe did a couple weddings that first year because I was still working as an EMT at a hospital, doing night shifts. So, let's say between 100 to 200.
Awesome.
Maybe.
What ended up like drawing you into, because you also do commercial work in video production with different resorts, ranches. I love some of the stories that you've told for ranches across like Montana and Colorado. A lot of them are somehow also oriented around fly fishing, which I think is probably just because like you love it.
Yeah, that was so as a wedding videographer specifically in Portland, it's not necessarily a full-time job, right? Like, and so then you have a love of filmmaking, you have the camera gear. Another thread, if you're an entrepreneur, you just enjoy starting things. And so then that's where I was exploring the world of commercial. Whereas like for you example, we kind of got a similar start. We were both interested in weddings. You got on with Still Motion at the time. That set you on a trajectory. Now you're doing a lot of live broadcast stuff, which I think is awesome. And then my kind of thing was looking at my own skill set and weddings. There's no pre-production. You kind of know the day, but it's not like you can look at a script and you're going to know what's going to happen in an hour. You might know like, oh, a certain event's going to happen in an hour, like let's say like a first look or something. But really you just have to be able to adapt and shoot. And that's something where I had a love of outdoors. I really enjoyed filming in that environment because you're just dealing with what's thrown at you. Who is that photographer that you did a podcast with prior to this?
Rich Crowder.
Rich Crowder. I was listening to some of that, and Rich Crowder was making the statement. He's like, a lot of photographers just can't adapt in a setting that is not ideal. I personally love that setting because I love just making the best opportunity out of what's dealt with you. For example, I remember we're shooting. I made a mistake. I got on a boat and I forget exactly what happened, but I think I forgot to grab extra batteries. And so I was being really conservative with, I think, my 2 batteries I had. And I was on a Sony at the time, and Sony pops batteries like Tic Tacs.
Sony cameras.
Yeah. And I was filming, and literally I'm just like being real conservative. I'm like 100% shooting for the edit. Like I'm only getting what I need. Certain moments, like bends in the river where there's a good parallax motion, because I'm in one boat with my own guide I'm directing, and then we're documenting another boat, right, with 2 guides and one of the guys' wives. And perfect example of like, you just can't write this. All of a sudden we look up and there's a moose cruising the riverbank, and just so happens that as I am downstream of the boat we're filming, that moose decides to hop in the river and cross. So in one shot, I have people fishing with a moose just swimming across the river in close proximity, so that he's, it's not like he's far off. So anyways, shooting stuff like that, I just am really good at, and I can deliver to my clients something that they enjoy, that then they can then show future guests and inspire them to come out and say, hey, if you're gonna spend a ton of money on a trip this year, do it with us.
Mm-hmm. And so could you just keep it like just a little closer,
like this?
Yeah, that's perfect. So that story was from a promotional like film that you created
for a fly fishing lodge.
For
a lodge in Montana. Fly fishing's a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because to back up, I enjoyed fly fishing, and I'm like, how could I document this? And I'm like, well, lodges offer that, and they need the services that I offer.
Amazing. And did that shot end up making it into the film?
Oh yeah, that's like a staple shot. Like, I mean, that's just like, that shot made it in the film because when somebody thinks about taking a trip to Montana, that's the moment they want. Mm-hmm. And that's the moment we just happen to get, and everybody gets different moments.
And of the different like films that you've created for lodges that have fly fishing as part of like an activity that you can do there, like how often do you see like a moment like that where you see like a moose or some sort of like amazing animal?
That was like, now granted, every time I've gone to Montana, I've seen a moose, I think. So like, except maybe my last winter shoot out there. But that's just, I think for Montanians, they could speak to this of like, oh, it's just like the way me and you see, I don't know what we'd see
squirrels
here in town. I know, right? Some fat squirrel, like, yeah. Anyways, yeah, but I think a moment like that is just very unique, really special, but probably happens more often than not, maybe to some degree. I was just really lucky to get it, and I was excited to get it. And it's exciting to be able to capture that stuff for a client, because they're just so happy at that point too, because they've invested a lot into a film, and you're just like, it's not like you can orchestrate that, right? And so, but just being ready to capture it and having the equipment and having the, you're in a boat, nothing's ideal. So many variables at that point, right? Like, it's like really quick telling the driver of the boat, the rower, say, hey, crank the boat so that I spin, because I want some movement in this and I need to be lined up. If the boat's wrong, there's lots of things that could happen. So,
yeah. And so you mentioned like a unique special moment that happens, at a lodge or at somebody's experience, like staying or being part of a fly fishing adventure or being part of like a boating trip or something like that. With the work that you do with wedding films, are you always kind of just trying to prepare yourself to be ready for the unique special moments that happen at somebody's like wedding ceremony or during a reception or something like that?
Anything like that. Yeah. I think when I talk to couples, I just was on a phone call this morning with a sweet gal who lives over here in Washington, Washougal, and she had done, it's so funny. She's like, man, I've been watching wedding films for years. She's like, it's my guilty pleasure. I hop on YouTube, type in like wedding films that make you cry, bride's first looks. And I'm just like, oh, this is so interesting.
Wedding films that make you cry.
Yeah, they type that in. Like every wedding videographer on YouTube, film will make you cry. Like that's just like it's in the keywords how they do it, because brides want to get emotional when they watch films. I always tell brides that I think this statement sums it up until I come up with a better one. I'll use this, but I've never looked at a stranger's wedding photo album and have it made me cry. I have looked at strangers' wedding films and cried. Right. So like, there's just something speaking to the power of film when used properly. So with that being said, couples want that. They don't know how to describe it. And I think that's where I love talking to couples and feeling like, hey, what do you want? But they just don't know. This is their first time going through it. But I love interpreting whatever they say and then tangibly putting it down to something, saying, hey, this is what I heard from you as the expert. This is what I think you're going to want to end up with. And this is how we go about getting that. So like I told a couple, let's take a first dance, for example. Sometimes I'll break down films to couples. So like if I talk to a couple and I find it would be helpful, I will literally record myself as I break down and edit and talk to her about all the moments in it.
So like you'd be watching the edit and talking to her about
I'm literally dissecting why did we use this moment? Why was this important? And a lot of the stuff they don't know why it was important because they're not the bride. They have no idea that the groom is getting a shot where he's holding the bride. They have no idea why the bride wants that. She wants it because she has a photo of her mom just like that on her wedding day where she was being held by her dad and her mom passed away of cancer. And so she's literally recreating a moment that she can have as a photo put on her fridge. And I'm just like, I'm getting this moment because she's going to see that and I know exactly what she'll think of, though nobody else watching that would ever have any idea. And so it holds way more meaning to her. And so what I like to do is I like to break those things down because I'm like, that's our goal for your wedding. Like no wedding's perfect. Our ability to shoot it is not perfect, but those are the things that we have in mind for you. But like just a simple thing of like, yes, a first dance is planned on a wedding. You can see it on the itinerary, but there's moments within a first dance which are important that can shine, right? So a simple moment of bride moves her hand ever so slightly up and grabs the back of the groom's head, or she falls into his chest, or you see her give him eyes. That's a moment that, okay, that just communicated something. There's something happening inside of her, and she just visually cued me off to it by the way she moved, acted, body motion, anything like that. And so if we build off those moments, then they can watch a film and say, why did that touch me? It's like, well, that's why it touched you. Like you're staying away from robotic. And part of that too is like, bride and groom hire, let's say you're a photographer, they hire a photographer and a videographer. We are literally getting more privy access to them than some of their closest friends. Even if you're in the wedding party as a maid of honor, we're still getting more access than that maid of honor is because we're with you at photo session, we're with you at all these things. And then for you to be intimate in front of us, kisses, reading heartfelt notes, anything like that, for you to be open enough to want to share your emotions, to cry when you put your dress on because your mom's seeing you again and she's crying and now you're crying. So like two things is like, man, I want to make you comfortable so that you don't feel any reservation towards letting that happen with a cameraman there, whether it's me or one of my team members. Or on the flip side of that, we want to protect that environment. We want to protect that just as much as you want to protect it because that's what we want to document. And so it is negative for us to create a negative impact on you because then we're like cutting off the branch we're sitting on. Blah.
It's a lot.
Things I think about. And that's why weddings, okay, think about the best film you've ever watched. So like, can you relate to any of these movies? Count of Monte Cristo, The Gladiator, Cinderella Man. Have you seen those at all?
I've seen Gladiator and Cinderella Man.
Okay, yeah. Cinderella Man. Let's go off Cinderella. Russell Crowe in a lot of those. Let's go off Cinderella Man. Love that story. Love those moments it portrays. The movie's so good, you get into it, and it emotionally impacts you. The reason it's so good is one, because of the story, but then the actors can execute on that story, right? Russell Crowe can get into character, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, they're not going to make it. But it's like, no, this is a movie set. There's cameras rolling. There's a director yelling, cut, retake. It's not real. He doesn't really love her. They're not really in dire straits. None of it's real, but as you're watching it, okay, now flip that on its head. You go to a wedding, everything's real. If you see the groom tear up when the bride walks down the aisle, he's not getting paid to do that. There's no director yelling cut. There's no script. He's literally feeling something and then visually showing it to you in emotion. Which means a wedding film should be more impactful than those if done right. To some degree, right? You want to be true to the day. If the couple's happy-go-lucky and cheery, then they're going to get a happy-go-lucky cheery film. If it's a mix, they're getting a mix. If the couple's like really it just needs to be a representation of them. But the beautiful thing about it is that nothing in it is fake. And there's no reason to try to make anything fake. There's no reason to stage anything. There's no reason to make it something it's not.
And so with people who are kind of coming in from like the outside of like not being familiar with like what a lot of the wedding films that are being created these days by people who are, you know, coming from the craft, from the perspective that you share, like, is there anything that comes to mind for you that you would think about was like an era or a change of styles that occurred within the wedding film industry where when people think about like wedding films that maybe were of yesteryear or of a couple decades back, they would just think like somebody who's there at the ceremony recording that with their handy cam and then going from the ceremony to the reception and then like standing around doing that, versus a lot of the films that you create, or all of the films that you create, or the films that were created when Still Motion, that company that I used to work for, that we met at the workshop of, when they used to create wedding films, like it was always very oriented around story. And that was, I remember, like the biggest like takeaway for me when I went to that workshop was that they had that mindset that like, oh, this is a story that we're going to tell. It's not just like we're hanging around like a fly on the wall and capturing it as it's going along, but we want to make sure that when we share it with the couple after the fact, it actually tells the beginning, middle, and end, or creates like emotional draw that, you know, we were feeling while we were there filming it. Do you think about anything where, like, if somebody asked about like, oh, why aren't you just, you know, like costing a couple $100 and being there with a handy cam like I could get from whatever company's been filming weddings for the past 30 or 40 years, like why is your approach different? Like how do you think about that? Because I'm sure you come across
the answer
that.
couples don't want to hear, just in a business point, if you don't charge enough to survive, you won't be around to film weddings next year.
Yeah.
So that's like at a base, right? But the flip side of that, the funny thing is that video can get paired a lot to photo, right? They kind of run hand in hand.
The equipment looks
gear
similar.
looks the same nowadays, right? Not back in the day. Back in the day, it was like a shoulder rig. Stuff back then did not set us up for success now. It set us up in success that they were doing it and they were creating and they were moving and you had people pushing the envelope. But it also created a cultural kind of negativity towards it. It's invasive. There's a light on the camera. There's all these things. But the flip side of that, so much has changed with technology, which has helped us be more adaptive on a wedding day. It's not so intrusive anymore. We have so much more power in low light settings, all these things. So like that's a lot of
smaller.
Yeah, like the impact, like a lot of times I walk over and there's a guest who has like the exact same camera I'm shooting on. You know, they're just taking photos or whatever. But the beautiful thing about that is that because we're creating less of an impact on the day, people are just more natural. You're getting more heartfelt stuff. And I mean, I was a part of film before it turned out so beautiful, right? Like,
yeah. What was your start with filmmaking?
I started back in high school. So we're like recording on mini DV tapes, log and capture within Final Cut 7 is what my school had at the time. And it was hideous. It was just hideous, but I loved it. I loved creating, I loved crafting it together. But like if you compare photo and video together, photo had an amazing track record. It's always had an amazing track record. It's not like film photography was bad. It was beautiful. It was probably better than a lot of the stuff we have now, right? Video is not the same case, right? You had people on like 8 mil. They had a lot of money. They're on 16 mil, right? And then you have just all that micro stuff that came out when we were kind of getting into it and playing around with it. But it didn't look great by any means, especially in comparison to photography. So all that changed in like 2004, right? 5D Mark II came out.
The video that had video,
right? Everything went digital. You had access to beautiful lenses, depth of field. Your colors were great. You could pop the card out of the camera, put it into your computer. Within 30 minutes, you could have an edit up on Vimeo. And so now everything. And now then you have guys like Still Motion who really led the charge on saying, hey, story, story, story. And I think a lot of people can speak back to a film Still Motion shot on a 7D with like 2 cameras or something like that. Yeah, 2 cameras and 1 shooter. Do you know what edit I'm talking about?
Yeah, it was filmed by
Patrick.
the person who was the owner of Still Motion at that time, Patrick Moreau, and he had pre-production Canon 7D Mark IIs, which are small DSLRs, and they had video as well, and he ended up having, I think, 2 of them, and he filmed the whole wedding
He
by
filmed the whole wedding by
himself.
himself. And that stuff, and you talk about story, you talk about like
So
the
those
story
cameras being
threads of,
small allowed him to be nimble and do that by himself.
and
Yeah.
it looked beautiful. It was
looked
just like,
good, yeah.
good gosh. So I think you mix the beauty with the art of storytelling and crafting something, beginning, middle, end, right? Build anticipation, bring it to a closure, surprise, right? Don't go where they think you're going to go. So things like that can just make a film that just really makes couples fall in love with the end product. I don't know how many times I have couples say, like, here's an example. I shot a wedding in the Swiss Alps. It was a wedding photographer getting married, so they're in the industry. They went to the Swiss Alps to elope. They weren't going to get video. The mom found out they weren't going to get video and freaked out. It's like, nope, you got to get video. Like, if you're not having the family come out, you got to get video for this. She hired us, spent, a good chunk of change on bringing out videographers. So me and my wife went and filmed it. She told her groom to be, who she was marrying, that she hired a videographer when they were at the airport boarding to fly to Europe. He freaked out, got upset because of the money. I didn't know that happened, right? We go to Europe, we film the elopement, everything's great, beautiful, exactly what they wanted. Fast forward a couple months, we're shooting a wedding here in Oregon in the Gorge at Tin Roof Barn. We're eating dinner together, and he tells me the story. He said, Craig, you don't know the story. I was at the airport. She told me. I was upset. We went and did the thing because finances, right? It's like you think that you don't need it. And some people, self-awareness, maybe they don't. Post-wedding, we're talking, and he's like, you have no idea, that's the best thing we did. I'm so glad that happened. I would have foregone everything else. Something along those lines of where you just don't know what you don't know, and now we're post, and I'm so glad she did it. It's one of the most valuable things to us. Because for him, he's thinking, man, at that point, post-wedding, you can't go back and change it. There's nothing you can do, which is why people write blog posts about number one regret. I wish I would have got a videographer. But they all know in the time, there's so many more pressing needs that come up. But after the fact, I just did an interview. I interviewed one of my couples who got married in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And a couple days ago, I Skyped in. I had a videographer show up and film them. I Skyped in, asked them questions. And one of her things was like, we're so glad we got this. Like, we're so glad we did it. It means so much to them. And it's so funny because it can so easily maybe hit the chopping block in the process, or couples can maybe not invest as much as they might want to looking back on it to get a better quality, right? To get something that they actually want to watch and just doesn't get stuck on a thumb drive somewhere and isn't intriguing enough for them to plug it in and watch it.
Yeah. And it's something that also, so I filmed that one wedding with you in 2012. And then I ended up doing, like, I was working with the production company. I didn't end up doing any wedding films with still motion. And then I ended up starting, I ended up then going the route of becoming self-employed and starting a production company on my own, and which is what I still do now. I freelance, and then I also run productions. But during that time, I ended up doing one wedding out at Timberline Lodge in 2015.
Yeah.
That we...
with you? Who are you with? Catch me
I
up.
was with my friend Bobby.
So you're doing it with a friend.
Yeah, and
I know
we
Bobby.
did that wedding 3-camera live streamed to YouTube because the bride's family was from Colombia and they couldn't attend.
Yep.
The groom's grandparents were in Florida. They couldn't fly in.
Yep.
And this was funny because at that time, Timberline Lodge didn't have strong internet connection. So I ended up finding out what cell provider had the strongest signals in that area, and that was AT&T.
Yeah.
So I ended up bringing in an AT&T Wi-Fi hotspot that we used to broadcast the ceremony, and then we ended up having the reception part of that broadcast as well because people were doing the toasts, and then the bride wanted to speak directly to her family in Colombia, so we had her speak directly into a camera, and that was all broadcast through YouTube, which was pretty interesting because the family loved it, but it was a couple technical hurdles that we had to overcome then at that time. But that was the second wedding, and then the third wedding I ended up ever like filming or being involved in was in Hawaii earlier in 2019.
Yep.
And you gave me some great insights there because that was the first time I'd ever filmed a wedding highlights film.
Yes.
You know, but yeah, I bring all that up because it's like it's always a different scenario. But what I wanted to ask you about, because you'd already started talking about it, was like you're mentioning films that you're doing in Europe, in the Swiss Alps, in Montana, across Oregon. I know you work a lot in Hawaii. So like, where do you like film weddings? Like,
I film weddings all over, right? It's like
all over the world. Yeah.
yeah,
Literally
I've
all
been
over the
lucky
world.
enough that I've made connections with certain people who connect with my work, and then they say, "Hey, we want to fly you out. We've chosen you over all these other videographers, and we want you to be with us on our day, and we want to see our day through your eyes." But it's funny because like I'm definitely drawn to the outdoors. I'm just naturally. I love the beauty of it. I love everything that comes with it. I love the challenges that come with it and jumping over the hurdles, whether it's technical audio things or things like that. But at the same time, I'm like growing to love more indoor weddings, like downtown Portland, buildings, the decorations that like Bloom Floral does, and the way that they transform spaces is like it's a both and. I shot a wedding at the end of last year with Danielle Caldwell. She's a wedding planner here in town, and she just put together a great team, and it was a great wedding at the Sentinel. Hope I'm getting that right. And it was just it's beautiful in its own way. But couples that I mean, to answer the question, where do we go? It's like, yeah, I've had lucky opportunities to go to many beautiful places to
Are you
document
doing something
stuff.
in Iceland as well?
Yeah, we did an engagement session. An engagement session. Not an elopement, not a wedding, an engagement session. So we did their engagement session in Iceland, multi-day, and then we shot their wedding later that year in Oahu,
Awesome.
which is crazy.
And with the way that you like work with your wedding film business and then the commercial side, like how long has that been the full time? Like how long has that been your career for? Since
Yeah.
Has it been pretty much since 2012, or were you still doing EMT work at that time?
No, I was still doing EMT work. The business, I think, I don't know if it's Dave Ramsey or John Acuff who says it, but essentially they treat it as, obviously you're doing work that's paying the bills. For me at the time, that was an EMT. I was working night shifts at a hospital. And then they say, here's your side hustle, the thing you want to do. And let's just pretend you're sitting on a dock and the side hustle's a boat. And they're like, you want to get that boat as close to the dock as possible before you try to jump into it. And for me, it's like you raise the income, get clientele, get all your ducks in a row before you hop into it. And I think, man, I started the business. My wife got pregnant with our first kid, Levi. Levi's due on like a Saturday. I get diagnosed with cancer on like a Thursday. He's born on a Saturday. I start chemo on like a Monday. Forget exactly how it goes. So I have like what they coined a term with chemo is chemo brain.
Was that 2014?
Well, yeah. So here we go. So I know how old my kid is. So then I can tell you. So Levi is like 6 something and some change. So that means I got cancer. Is he? Dang.
It was 2014.
That means I got cancer 6-ish years ago. So it's 2020. So let's say 2014. Yeah. So that means I spent 3+ years working in my business while also running a full-time job at the hospital. And then when I got cancer, I took that time off. I was really lucky to be at the hospital. So like my insurance picked it up there and they covered like $100,000 plus bill. And during that off season, when I was feeling good and wasn't feeling like crap from chemo, I would just hustle on the business and think of ways, because I'm like, well, yes, this is crap. And if anybody's gone through cancer or chemo, they know that it just kind of builds and gets worse and worse as you keep going through sessions of it. And so then during those times, I'd have a couple days where I'd feel good, and then it would just be like I was just on the couch. And right when chemo started, I was also like bookending my days with fevers until the chemo was able to knock it down enough. So it was just a super tough season, but I just took that time to. It was tough because at the same time you're wanting to build the business. I forget exactly all that I was going for, but one part of it was like, do I book clients? Because I could be dead. Like it's 2014. Do I book a client? Like, I don't even know if I'm going to beat cancer. So yeah, But with that being said, I beat it. The chemo knocked it out fairly quick. It was diffuse large B-cell non-Hodgkin's lymphoma stage 3. They got 4 stages. It was everywhere but the bones in the bone marrow, which that was an interesting experiment, trying to figure out if it was in the bone marrow. But yeah, so I didn't die. I went full time after that. I went back to work one day and then I quit, which I kind of felt like a jerk about. But at the same time, I think most entrepreneurs will realize once you get the itch to go do something, it's really hard to keep that off and put your head down and work for an employee when in every fiber in your being wants to go start a business. And so I worked for them for a couple of years. And then at that point, it was like, I got the boat. I think everybody wishes they would have got the boat a little bit closer, but I jumped for the boat and I've been going at it since full time since 2000, let's say 14.
Awesome. And so happy you didn't die. I don't know. It's like weird to laugh at, but I do mean that because I remember I was sitting in the parking lot at Still Motion, and I think you texted me like, "Hey, you got a minute to chat?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." It's like we went out, and you're like, "Oh yeah, like I'm, diagnosed with cancer."
Did
and
I call you?
Nicole's having our son in just a couple days.
Yeah.
It was like something like that, and I was just like, "Wow, that is the craziest thing I've heard
What a crazy
in a
world
long time."
I mean, you're thinking about so many things. You're like, if I die, what's my wife going to do? Should she go back and live with her folks? Does she stay here? Who's going to take care of the kid?
Yeah.
And at the same time, you're like, we got a newborn. What's this like? And I wasn't super helpful to my wife in the process because I'm like just sucked out on the couch. The photos are interesting.
But the other than the silver lining of you not, of you still being here and
What was the question?
adding 2 more children, I kind of lost my train of thought because that was like so crazy what you just shared and what I remember like feeling, because that's kind of a thing that I think everybody can do. It's like they'll remember where they were when so-and-so passed away, or when so-and-so like told them this is happening, or when Nicole told you that, you guys are having a kid.
Yeah.
Your wife, like I'm sure you can remember it back, and there's emotions attached to that. So I think that's something also interesting where I'm certain that the brides that you work with, or the grooms that you work with, or the couples that you work with, when they see the films, they remember exactly how they're feeling in those moments, or it brings them like as close as they can with the emotional state that they were in when they see an image or a short clip.
That's another thing I talk about. It's, I guess, being so close to death. It's funny I say that too, and it's like sometimes, it's like you could be driving down the road and all it takes is one guy to swerve the lane a little bit and you just got into a head-on. But getting cancer in our culture and what it does, it's very much like, is this like, okay, this just really hit and I feel it in my body. I feel it getting trashed and shutting down and not working properly. And unless something changes, it's like without chemo, I don't know, I probably would have lasted maybe a couple more months at the rate that I was going. And in addition to that too, when I met my wife, I met my wife on like a Monday kind of thing. I took her out on our first date on like a Thursday. My brother passed away that Saturday, and she was super close to meeting him, days to meeting my brother. She never knew him at this point, right? The only thing she knows of my brother is photos and stories, which fall flat. Like, it's funny, I have to realize, like, she doesn't know. She wasn't with him. She didn't know. She never got to spend the time to, like, it'd be really hard to describe you to somebody. And let's just say I did the best possible job. And let's just say they then did have an opportunity to actually meet you. What I described would just be a pale comparison of what actually happened in the process of meeting you. And so I talked to couples about that. Like, I was just telling the couple today when I was on the phone with her, I said, this is kind of on the morbid side of things, but I think it does. I don't know how else to put it into perspective. If my wife died and somebody said, hey, Craig, for the rest of your life, I got 2 boxes in front of me. In one box, there's 20 photos. In another box, there's 20 minutes of candid video. you only get to choose one box and keep it for the rest of your life. Which are you going to take? Hands down, 100% of the time, I'm always taking the video, because video brings me something that photo can't touch. If I see a great photo of you, like let's take a wedding, for example, if you see a photo of a speech and you see let's say for the bride, the father of the bride's up there giving some speech, and you see the bride like wiping a tear away, you have nothing else. You're like, what did he say? What was that moment? What was leading up to that moment? What transpired after that moment? And I think that's where video fills this huge gap. And like you said, it's the best gateway portal we have at the moment to take you back to something. Like we were just at my folks' house over Thanksgiving, and we sat down, like they're moving houses. And so we sat down and we just watched home video. And something really interesting about that, this is a golden nugget for you. We're watching video and her dad's filming it, and we watch multiple things. And her dad would be filming like they like say they went on vacation. He's filming the venue and what the pool looks like and what the beach looks like. And then would film a kid, say Nicole's brother Ryan, playing in the sand. And then would film like her other brother Michael talking about what he's experiencing. And then next, we'd have 5 more minutes of like scenic shots. And the whole time we're all sitting in the living room watching this. We're like, oh my gosh, stop filming scenics. We want to see Michael talking, Nicole talking, your mom. We want to see Ryan playing in the sand. And I was like, man, it was so fun sitting there for that experience, because now I know how I need to be filming my own family moments. I'm going to interview my daughter. I'm going to ask I'm going to ask my daughter like, hey, well, who's your favorite friend today? What do you want to be when you grow up? Just anything to just get at what are they thinking? Who are they? What are they like? What are they cruising on? What, like, how old? I always ask my kids, how old do you think I am? They're 3. How old do you think I am? I think you're 4. Oh, really? Do you know how old Levi is? He's 6. So you think I'm younger than Levi? I just like their brains. It's just so fun to see how they think. So it's capturing stuff like that where, I don't know, I lost my thought, but like that's why film is just so, it's just, there's no other way to transport it back in time.
Yeah.
At the moment.
Yeah.
It could change.
No, I couldn't agree more with you, because like I've had that experience too, where I sometimes keep a voicemail. This happened to me recently where my voicemail box was full. I had no idea until some people were telling me. But my voicemail box was full because I was saving every single voicemail from my mom or my dad. And I think I had some from my brothers as well. But the reason I was doing that was I had heard a short story. It wasn't as much a story, but it was a little note from someone whose father had passed away. And they mentioned how thankful they were because they had something happen where all of their voicemails were saved by Google Voice.
Yes.
And they just went back and just were listening to all of these voicemails from their parent who had recently passed. And that was something that made me like think, you know, not trying to be morbid as well, but like also wanting to do the best that I could to save any sort of nice notes from my parents, because who knows, like when would be the last time that I would hear them. And a video that has images and audio combines those two, so it, is double impactful. What I was wanting to ask you about with the way that you've been creating your work and then sharing your work and then interacting with people who are wanting to potentially work with you, where do most of the people who you end up working with come across your work? Is it through other couples that they had known or maybe do know that have had your services done or have had work with you for wedding films?
The best way that people find my work and the happiest couples is always, for me, I've just built my business on vendor referrals. So meaning
vendor referrals.
So like I focus just as much as I'm trying to think. When I go to a wedding, I want to make a great product for the couple, but I'm not in a vacuum. I'm not in a bubble. It's a wedding is a team event, and things that I do have ripple effects. So if that's something interesting, I often hear some horror stories around commercial videographers starting a commercial and then going and doing a wedding, and they just don't treat it like it needs to be treated. And it has negative impacts across the board to other team members on the day. Team members who you don't even know, right? So
I like that thinking, team.
It's very much. It's equivalent to. I was talking to a wedding planner, and I made the reference where she was on. She played soccer through college, got a full ride, broke her back in the process. Crazy story. And I was like, a wedding day, and she gets it. A wedding day would be like me hiring her as a soccer player and say, hey, there's a soccer game tomorrow. I've hired 10 other people to play. They don't know who you are. You don't know who they are, but you need to act as a team and beat this other team. And that's a wedding day. Not that we're like effectively beating another team, but you're on a team and you got to play well with them, and you got to quickly adapt to how they shoot, how they interact, and how can I complement that? Because I want it to happen like this. I don't want it to happen like this. Because if it happens like this, ultimately the couple loses, right? Like in the product, because you could be negatively impacting the photographer or the DJ or the wedding planner or the timeline. And if you negatively impact the timeline, you're negatively impacting the catering, which is then negatively impacting 100 guests waiting for their dinner. It's just like, it's just a crazy ripple effect. And so with that, I just work really hard on making sure that I'm like the easiest guy to work with, because I know it benefits everybody, especially the couple. And so with that being said, whether it's the planner and just making communication really easy on the wedding day, because wedding planners are not with the couple a lot of the times throughout the day, they're busy getting everything ready. So it's like I start group texts between the planner, the photographer. Later in the day, I might include the DJ in that, and I'm just updating them like, hey, just so you know, like, bride's getting your dress on, so everybody knows. Or letting the photographer know like, hey, bride's about to get dressed, come here. Or hey, groom's getting ready, send your second over. And so usually couples find out about me through wedding planners, photographers. Or maybe they'll see this podcast somehow.
Yeah, I wouldn't even think about that, because like my thinking is always it's going to be another couple who is there that is a friend of that couple and then saw their film and then like says, I want to have that same sort of
And
feeling
I've got that
I had.
sometimes.
Yeah, but the vendors, that's an interesting.
Yeah. Because they're getting booked before me. And I think a lot of couples' fears are, if we hire a video, you have to think about it. They spend a lot of time investing and thinking about their photographer. And if they hire a videographer, they don't want the videographer to negatively impact the photographer that they just spent a lot of time thinking through. And they know our rules are fairly similar, and we kind of have to dance like a tango the whole day. And so with that being said, then ideally the best thing for a couple to do is ask their photographer for a recommendation. The downside to that is, for example, if I'm thinking about the couples first, this is what I'm thinking, okay? A photographer is going to recommend somebody that's easy to work with and has okay work. Like, for example, if you're a wedding photographer and I'm a videographer and we show up to a wedding and you've never seen my work and we've never worked together, I've done that with multiple photographers where I've never worked with them. I've had those photographers say to me at some point throughout the day, wow, because I like to email the photographers before we work together, and I say, hey, I'm easygoing. We're going to talk through our plans, communicate. I just want to make it a win-win for you because I can adapt. I've had photographers say throughout the day, say, man, you were like the best photographer to work with. Like, I've had horrible experiences prior to this. You're the best. They're not saying I'm the best because they watched one of my films during a break and they're like, oh my gosh, that was amazing. They're saying the best because I am so seamless to work with them. So now they might recommend me to a bride, but they're recommending it not fully selfishly, but in a good way. They're recommending it because, hey, I can work with this guy. He'll make a great product, a good product still. And I can also still operate the way I like to operate. And so that's my thing of where I want to make it that they can operate the way they want to operate. But at the same time, I'm also giving the couple something they're oohing and awing over. So I forget the question, but
No, it makes sense. I was really, I think, wondering like the thinking around how, you know, the vendors, the other people working on the weddings that you're a part of, why are they, you know, important to play nice with? And, and the way that you explained it to me makes a lot of sense because
they're your coworkers.
Yeah, exactly. Because I've been part of productions where maybe my team or the team that I'm a part of comes in and we're the team that's capturing a story of a couple people who are also speaking at an event, or we're capturing a story that is not part of the central discussion that's happening at a conference, but is central to them because they helped organize the conference or something like that. So then we have to interact with the lighting team or the in-house audio team. And like you had mentioned, like I always like to think about it as team. Like we are a team together to make these people, their message, like be as strong as possible, to have the experience that the attendees of the event are having as strong as possible, to have the viewers at home have as much fun as possible watching whatever we're putting together. And with, like, I'm looking at your cup, like the Portland Boulder Rally is a big rock climbing competition that happens every year in Portland, and the amount of teams that are involved in that is like numerous, in the sense that you have people who are setting up the climbs that are happening on the walls that the competitors are climbing. You have a team that lights the walls so people who are in the audience at home but also watching it like inside the venue can see really well. You have a DJ who is playing music, but then you have somebody who's controlling the audio that the venue is hearing, but then we also have audio that the people at home are hearing, and all of those pieces have to fit like together in a puzzle, and when one of them is off, like the whole puzzle could not come together.
Yes. That's a wedding in a nutshell.
Yeah, but I really love the way that you kind of discuss how you coordinate communications with everybody involved, because it's not a guarantee that everything's going to go smoothly, but it's a almost like an insurance policy that, oh, well, I know I've at least set this up as best as I could to ensure as few details slip through the cracks as possible, because there's always things that go wrong, like in my understanding of how productions like operate.
And if things go wrong and you're privy to that information, you are in a position to share that information with other people who would also help. So if you're just thinking about other people, if I was a DJ, if I was a wedding planner, what would I want to know right now that I personally know? Trying to think what else. Oh, like I had a commercial shoot downtown Portland with EO Talks, and it's so funny because it's like I show up and somebody's running sound. They don't have to do anything for me. Meaning it's not their job to take care of my stuff, but they're nice enough to give me an XLR feed of their mics, right? They're nice enough to do this and that. And it's just like, man, I'm so thankful for them. It's like, I knew she was going to say no. There's this gal running sound. It's like, hey, we got extra time. I'm going to run down and get some Starbucks. Like, let me get you a cup of coffee. And I get it. She doesn't know me. Everybody's in Jersey. Like, oh no, I don't want to, need anything. But it's like, I want to do anything I can to make everybody else's job there easy, simple, pleasant, enjoyable. It's just like, it's just so fun creating win-wins and making something that maybe she was having a bad day that day and it just wasn't her day. It's like, if there's anything I can do to like just make it better, it's just not hard to do that. So anyways, it's just fun. How can you make it's fun to think about, what are they in? Like, she's stuck at her sound booth. I always think about DJs at a wedding, like, you're kind of glued to your sound booth. And I always tell them, like, let me know. Like, I'll go get you a drink. I'll grab you an appetizer. Like, you're stuck there. If I was you, I would love if somebody would offer to go get me something. Like, hey, I'll make sure your dinner's ready. Hey, I'll let you know when dinner's ready. Like, if you're stuck, like, let me run an errand for you. I got time right now.
Right on. This is brilliant advice. With people who are coming up in maybe like people who are getting started in a career in filmmaking, a career where they're thinking like, oh, maybe wedding films is a good place to start. Are there any things that you wish you would have known when you were starting out that you would share with those people, or any stories that have taught you like hard lessons, but lessons that you don't forget now?
Yeah, there's a ton. I'll just drop things like figure out your media management, figure out bulletproof ways to get that done. Something
so SD cards and
SD cards, hard drives, backup software, cloud backup. I mean, you name it. Like redundancies. Huge list. Insurance, a lot of business stuff, right? And then on the flip side, I'd recommend a book, E-Myth. Because there's when getting into a business, it's like, are you a creative that maybe should be working for a company, or are you a creative who also wants to be a business owner? Then you need to be the business owner, and sometimes you get to dabble in creative. I mean, like maybe you're a solid freelancer, maybe you want to build a team, and so I would just say, one, start dabbling and figure out what you want. And even if you look up to somebody what they do, that does not have any correlation to maybe what you should be doing or what you're built towards. And I think that's the hardest thing of being self-aware of, like, the more and more I find it, I love the company I'm running. I love working out of my backyard in a studio. I do not have employees. I love the fact that, I took a Monday off with you and I spent almost the whole day with my kid and we went rock climbing. He joined. After that, we went and got macaroni and cheese and ice cream sandwiches and, just did all this stuff. But some other things I would say is something that really helped me was I'm just a hands-on guy and I just need to see it done. And there was a company that I looked for a company who did work that I aspired to, emotional, connecting work. And then I traveled down to a workshop, trained with them in California, and then I reached back out to them. Shade Tree, Chad and Drew.
I've worked with Drew more than
those guys
a handful
rock.
of times.
They're just they
like 6 times in
amazed
the past
me.
year.
The way they made you feel, the way they took care of you, the films they made, their branding, and I love that they just pushed the mold. But something else too is I reached back out to them and I said, hey, I just need to see somebody do a wedding from start to finish. Right. And so I said, I will fly myself down to California. I'll stay in a hotel. You just tell me where it's at. I'll be an extra hand for you. And they were kind of like, yeah, we'll do it. And so they just let me, which is kind of a gamble, having some stranger, granted they knew me a little bit, but having some stranger come on an intimate wedding
So
day.
you were a workshop attendee, and then you're like, hey, I want to come and see how you actually do this.
I'm like, just show me how you do it, and I could start executing.
I guess that was, in a way, the similar story that I had, but with me being you, in the sense that I came with you to your wedding that it was for Dane and Erica.
How do you handle audio? How do you set this stuff up? And man, that was I flew a Steadicam at that wedding. Oh my gosh, things I never should have done. And that's another thing.
That was a cool shot.
I did like the shot. They loved that film. She just Dane was a friend of mine growing up, and it was super fun to go back and shoot their wedding. And Erica, the bride, she just loved it. It was such a sweet gift to her. Mm-hmm. But that would be my other thing of advice is, if you go see somebody's work, say Shade Tree Films or Still Motion or whatever it was, and whoever it is now, if you go see their work, you don't have to do it that way. Mm-hmm. Take the principles out and step away. Perfect example for me is, I had in my mind, you had to get this equipment, you had to do things this way, and that's how it was currently being done at the time. It was just in large part, Still Motion was doing it that way, Shade Tree was doing it that way. And right now, I don't touch Steadicams. I don't touch that stuff at weddings. I lock stuff off. I go handheld. And it's so freeing. And for me, the less gear, the better, because I just give me a Sony A7S II and a 55 millimeter, and I'll shoot your entire wedding, and you'll fall in love with it. Mm-hmm. Because it's not about those other things. It doesn't have to be about. But for you, it might be about those things, and that might be your signature. And so the cool thing about the industry now is that it has grown so much, and there's so many branches of, man, this guy does it this way. And I've talked to so many wedding videographers that I get inspired by. I'll reach out to them. We'll hop on a Skype call, and I just love chatting it up with them. And I just love that they do. I'm like, man, I wouldn't do it that way, but I love that you do it that way. And I bet some couples love that. And I love the work and how it turns out. But there's so many different ways to just how you want to do it. Mm-hmm. And that's super fun. And so I would just say, don't let the pressure of thinking you need gear, certain kind of gear or whatever. It's again, right now, if you said there's a wedding tomorrow, hop on a plane, you get one camera and two audio. I'd like 2 audio recorders, one camera and 2 audio recorders. Go shoot that wedding. I'll go cool, done, and maybe a monopod. Yeah, I'd be totally cool with that.
No, I think there's so many valuable nuggets of wisdom there, because even when I was talking with you before I went to film the wedding in Hawaii, I ended up also chatting with my friend Natalie Wallace. Shout out to Natalie. She creates amazing films.
What's her company?
Birdhouse.
Okay. Where's she located?
She is in Pennsylvania.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. She films all over the world as well. She has done weddings in Italy and Oregon and Hawaii.
Remind me to look that up.
Yeah. Yeah. She shoots on 16 millimeter, right? Sometimes. So she'll sometimes shoot
film.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
She'll actually shoot on film.
Beautiful.
But
I mean, that's a huge camera. Your rolls are I think that big.
Limited too. It's not a digital where you can just erase the clip or get a bigger SD card. You actually have to pay for the film, and then you pay for the film to be digitally transposed or whatever. But the quality of her films is same as yours. It's just super super thoughtful. But one of the things that I got from both of you in terms of advice for a destination wedding where I was flying with my girlfriend and we had a backpack each. So we were bringing very little equipment, was like not worrying about ND filters, which
yeah.
for people who
Commercial
like,
world.
yeah,
Great
if you come from
examples.
commercial, you're like, what? You're like breaking the, rule of 180
Mm-hmm.
degrees. Like, so what that means is if you're filming 30 frames per second, your shutter would be like 1/60, or
Mm-hmm.
24 frames is 1/50 or
1/50.
whatever. And it was something that I was definitely like concerned about before going, and thinking like, okay, well, I hear what they're saying, like, oh, ND filters get in the way because if you're having to switch lenses, like you're then having to
Oh
switch your
gosh.
ND filters. And I ended up just deciding like, all right, I'm just going to go with what Craig and Natalie said, where they say, don't worry about ND filters, just crank your shutter, make
Yep.
sure the exposure is good. And I did that, and I shot 90+% of the wedding handheld, and it was a beautiful experience because the equipment was light. I had a camera on me all the time that I wasn't worried about, oh, how am I going to get next to them if we're inside a bus and there's a really small seat? How are we going to be able to move quickly around a beach? And then am I going to have to stick something into the sand and then get sand into all my equipment?
Oh my gosh.
So I ended up just being handheld with a mirrorless camera that has like internal digital stabilization, which works pretty good. Some of the lenses I had stabilization, and
Yeah.
the wedding film turned out awesome. And what was really nice too, in terms of like ease of production, the couple didn't want their voices recorded. They come from a culture where they didn't want to have their voice as part of the story,
Interesting.
which was interesting. I still recorded it for
Yeah.
the ceremony, but it made my thinking around equipment a lot easier. Yeah, they wanted like a beautiful soundtrack and then beautiful images, but
Okay.
for them, voice was not what they were after.
So two things from that. I'm
Yeah.
thinking if a videographer's watching this, they're just starting out. Two things I pick up from that. Let's just talk about the ND filters real quick. You could be the company that says, no, we are doing ND filters and we really care about that and we are meticulous and we're going to put a top-notch craft out and that'll be us. And on the wedding day, you enjoy it. It doesn't stress you out. It doesn't slow you down. You found a way to do it. Then I'd say, touche, go do it. I won't do that. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do that. And then the flip side of that is the next thing you said, the couple didn't want their voiceover. You could make so there is a company that I can think of. I can't remember their name off the top of my head, but literally they travel all over the world and they say, we don't use voice. We think it like a little business tip here. Okay. Slight tangent. There's a company in Portland called like Will's Leather over on 23rd. Okay. My brother-in-law, Ryan Barry, owns a leather making company. They make handbags called Hard Mill, aprons, knife rolls,
Yeah,
all
the
that stuff.
aprons
Okay.
I remember seeing.
A big thing is made in the USA. Okay. That's a positive. And if you say not made in the USA, that's a negative. That's a downside, right?
Depends on who you ask.
In their
Yeah.
world, okay, right? I go to Will's Leather on 23rd. Great place. If you ever cruise in Portland, go there. They'll make you coffee because they have an espresso machine. I love the experience they gave. And you walk in and like the dude's like, hey, nice to meet you. Like, what can I make you? I'm like, oh, sweet. Does it no, we'll just cruise it. While you walk around, you'll have a hot cup of espresso. Right? And I'm like, oh, that's so cool. And we're walking around talking and we look at a product and it's not made in the USA. And I think I asked like, hey, do you guys make your stuff USA? And they say no. And then they turn it into a positive. They say we go where the talent is. So these were made in Portugal. These were because they've been making stuff like this for decades, right? For centuries. I'm
Centuries,
like, dude. I was like, one, way to spin that to a positive. I love how you brought that up. I don't see it as negative. So anyways, I bring that up because, why did I bring that up? Oh, music. This company makes films with no music. And I'm just like.
Or no voice?
No, it's all music. Yeah.
Oh, all music, no voice.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Music, no voice. No couple recording, no audio recording on the day of, period, right? And I'm just like, I'm like, I wish somebody would have told me you could do that.
Yeah.
Though I do like voice, but I love that somebody said, hey, I see what's happening in the industry. I don't want to do that. I'm going to do it like this and make a successful business out of it. Now, granted, I have no idea how successful they are as a business, but look at their films. Unless somebody's paying for them to travel all over the world, I'm like, dude, that's phenomenal. And they say on the website, they say, it's like a FAQ. They say, hey, do you guys do voiceover? Do you like capture art? And they say, no, we feel like that's distracting from the day. We wanted to just, and I'm like, anyways.
Yeah, it's just how they frame
Bringing it up, just saying like you can do whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
And that's what's so cool about the industry right now is because it's just branching. Like photography has been branching for a long time. Video is now just like really branching deep, which I think is cool because it just offers so much more for couples to choose from and find exactly what they want. They're not just stuck with a guy in the back with a camcorder or we're evolving and growing, and technology is changing so fast.
What's getting you most excited about, what's getting you most excited about the projects that you have coming up?
Things that I'm just really excited about. I'm just like, in terms of weddings, I'm personally really excited about pushing me and my team and just creating better content.
'Cause you also create same day edits. For people who don't know that,
Oh, dude.
what is the same day edit, and where does that fall in terms of your preference or
I started
dislike?
offering that last year. I cracked it out for a ton of brides, and it's just like icing on the cake. It's like, for example, there was a wedding shot downtown Portland. It's Sentinel wedding, kind of like I was talking about earlier. There's a different one though, and the bride and groom, I don't even know how it happened. I'm like cutting their edit. So a same day edit is essentially same day edit. I will literally crack you a 60-second teaser, and you will watch it at the end of your wedding. Like, I will
Do you bring in a
I will
projector or anything
no, I
like
don't
that?
deal with that yet. I keep it real simple. At some point I will pull you aside and say, "Hey, I got a surprise for you." And you're going to watch a same day edit of your day. 60
But if they
seconds.
have a same day edit, they're paying extra for it, I'm
Yes.
assuming. And
Yes.
who would it be a surprise for? Would the
Well,
bride
good point.
not know?
Good. Like, when I first started it, I surprised couples with it because I wanted to show something.
You wanted to also
tangible,
see if you could do
right?
it, maybe?
Yeah, I wanted to see if I could do it. So it's the same day edit. I bring you aside. I personally like to just set you off to the side, give you a little alone time, and kind of squeeze you into a room because I also want to like film you responding to it, right? So that's where you sit down. I did that with this couple. I pulled them aside. I surprised them with it, and they watched it. Prior to that, the bridal suite where they were staying that night had gotten broken into at the Sentinel Hotel on their wedding night. No idea how that happened. That really threw them for a loop. Like, they're celebrating, but then they're like, what just got stolen from our place, right? I found out about that while I was editing it. The wedding planner from Bridal Bliss told me. I ended up showing them their film, and she just took a dive, a little bit of a dive, right? You're like, oh my gosh, like, I don't want it to bother me, but somebody was just in our room. Like, I feel violated. If anybody's had their house broken into, probably a similar feeling. And then I was able to come in and kind of like not let the night end on that and surprise them with the same day edit, which just like she loved. She was so happy. And what's so funny is like, it's almost this way to just celebrate everything that happened in the last 24 hours. And it's literally, the day was great. In this case, it had a pretty negative impact on the day, but that break in, but literally this is just like a cherry on top. It's like you just made a cake and I'm just coming over and like putting a little bit of whipped cream and a cherry right on top.
So people could think about it as you're watching the Super Bowl, and then they have the Super Bowl highlights right at the end. So you're
With
doing that
all
with the
those
wedding
peak
film.
moments.
Yeah.
Yep. And maybe you missed a couple moments because you went up and got food, or like in the
Is
Super
that
Bowl example.
more? Is that becoming more and more in demand?
That's something I just personally dabbled with. It's something where even if a couple doesn't buy it sometimes, and I got the energy, I like to throw it down just because it's so fun to surprise the couple. And it's such there's the excitement that they show at that. I don't see that excitement. Like I don't know if it was the first couple I did it with, but there was one couple I did it with. I surprised them with it, and they freaked. They just like, they threw themselves back in the chair. They're like kind of rocking, laughing, like, oh, like oohing and awing. And if you could give that a point, like, okay, on a scale of 0 to 10, the excitement and level of emotion they're feeling right there, let's say that's an 8. I I would say the closest competing moment for that same amount of energy was probably when they said I do and walked out the aisle. Does that make sense? Like, I just added another 8 to their day, which is
So like another special
crazy.
moment that they'll
Yes.
remember. Like, oh, remember when at the end of the day,
Oh my
Craig showed us
gosh,
what
like,
happened during the day.
Don't you love when you
I
go
didn't even
somewhere
see
and you just
putting
get
on your
surprised?
tuxedo tie or whatever.
Dude,
you
that's
know?
like going to a hotel and them coming up and knocking on the door a second after you walking into your room, be like, "Oh yeah, and we're upgrading you to the suite, the master suite on the top floor," just to be able to surprise them with something. It's just super, super fun.
Yeah, because one thing that I've started to notice a little bit from some of the weddings that I've attended, but then even from the wedding that we were filming, or I filmed back in September, just with the evolution of phone technology as far as cameras, and then internet connectivity being literally everywhere, people are just sharing so many things in real time. And
Yes.
the reason I asked if people were, or couples were demanding same day edits or requesting same day edits more is because I'm just wondering if the desire for having things now has permeated into that space as well. Oh, I want my wedding film tomorrow. I want it today. I want it now.
The
You know?
faster you give it to them, you win.
Yeah. How long do couples typically wait for a film?
So I don't even want to talk about that.
The only reason I bring that up is because when I was working for a before mentioned company, I'm not going to mention who that was, but you can figure it out if you were listening a little bit. There were some couples that waited not just over a year. There were couples that waited for their wedding film that ended up splitting before the wedding film was delivered to them. Which, I mean, couples can split like a week after, a month after, but these couples were waiting sometimes over a year for their wedding film. So that was bad business practice, I think, from that company. But how long does a couple typically wait for a film?
I'll answer that. I'm going to back up a little bit. Mm-hmm. We were talking about you don't have to do what you see other companies do. Mm-hmm. And then I talked about you don't have to use indie filters or you can. You don't have to use audio or you can.
You don't have to do a same day edit, but you can.
You don't have to use a glide cam. You just go down the list. Just do whatever the heck you want to do. That's something, looking back at it, that I adopted. I adopted a 20-week turnaround, right? 4 months, 5 months.
Yeah.
Something like that, right? I adopted that, and you just kind of go as status quo when there never should have been a reason for that, right? So right now, my goal for 2020 couples is to get it within like 3 to 5 weeks. I just want to give it to them, right? Mm-hmm. That gives us time to sit on it, edit it, come back to it, make sure it's just right.
How do you deal with that when you're in like high season where you're filming multiple weddings per week?
You're disciplined. You bring on help. You just get it done. There's just no reason.
Yeah.
Like edits.
So 3 to 5 weeks is how long couples are waiting for. Typically.
Right now they're 20 weeks for me.
Oh, they are.
And they'll hit within that. So it's like 2019, they'll hit within that spread.
So
like
you say 20 weeks, but you'll get it to them sooner.
And I, as a business, I'm just thinking about, I see why people don't want to do that because they might not have the resources to do it. They're one-man shops. They take a really long time to edit. There's lots of things going on in the industry of why that might be like that. They might do commercial work and they just don't have the time to sit down and edit, and they don't want to put out junk. But for me, something where I want to push myself and not accept status quo in certain areas is giving couples films quicker. And it's just, I don't know. I just want to surprise them, give it to them early. I want to beat the photographer. I want to get it to them before that. I want them to have it while the hype's still there. Mm-hmm. I want Grandpa in Arkansas who wasn't able to come to the wedding see it, like things like that. Because that's another thing. A lot of these weddings, you hinted on it, like live stream. It's like I want to get it out so people who couldn't be at the wedding can celebrate with them.
Yeah. That live stream wedding we did 5 years ago. Yeah, that was great because after we live streamed it, it was done. There was no highlights film or anything like that. They literally wanted the ceremony live streamed, and then the fact that we live streamed also the reception, that was a bonus, but there was no request for any sort of highlights film or any sort of short film. They wanted just that.
Yep.
And we finished the wedding and it was over.
Yeah.
And it was really nice. And that's something I enjoy about the live event work that I do, that oftentimes the project does conclude right after the live stream is over, but more oftentimes than not, there's usually a request for highlights. There's a fine tuning that has to be done with like a longer form, like documentary style edit, but the amount of work that has to be done beforehand in order to ensure a really tight show, like, that's where all of the work happens. It all happens before, and then 5% of it is actually like the live event, but the amount of stress that is resolved or had to be dealt with, that usually increases quite a bit because of the fact that there is literally like all of the viewing audience like then and there when it's happening, and then right after it's done, it's not there anymore. Mm-hmm. Yeah. With like the up and comers, the people who are getting into the filmmaking space and want to learn from you, is there opportunities for that as well?
At the moment, nothing super clear cut. Mm-hmm.
Because you give a lot of great advice. Like, I mean, you're sharing a lot of amazing advice here,
Yeah.
but also on your Instagram feed. I know sometimes you come into the stories and you share nice little nuggets, and I think those are really valuable. But then they disappear. So I wonder, like, what's Craig
I know,
planning on
nothing
doing
evergreen.
for continuing that education?
Things that I'm going to do after hanging out with you and talking with you, I'm pushing myself to start a podcast. And I think industry people will really be helped with that. And also, I also don't want to forget about brides.
So a podcast for people who are wanting to work in wedding filmmaking or
All
wedding
geared
photography.
towards wedding, but not,
Everything
yeah.
around
So, like,
wedding.
if you watched it, it's mostly going to be highlighting people in the industry, whether it's florist, brides will learn a lot from it, but that's not to say you can't watch it and glean a ton for how to run. Because obviously, since I'm hosting it, I'm a videographer. I'm coming from my perspective and how I see things. So I guarantee by me doing that, I'm going to learn a ton of how to serve people better on the wedding day and just understand like florists, how to take care of their product that they make. Like, if you set down flowers on the ground, they get bruised. They freak out when a couple like sets their stuff on the ground. It's like you're literally bruising flowers that they spend a lot of time and energy on, and then when those flowers get picked up, if they're not rotated right, they're in a photo wrong. So it's just caring for people in the industry, and if you were to listen to that and learn what's important to them, that's going to 100% make you a better person to work with, and everybody's going to love working with you, which has just been a huge thing for me of just saying, I just want to, there's things that I wish people knew about videography so they could make it easier on us, and I want to know what are those things for other people in the other industries.
Cool.
While at the same time too, as brides plan their weddings, they've never done it before. It's like a part-time job. It stresses them out. I talked to a bride this morning. She's like, I had my first nightmare. Our wedding venue burned to the ground. I was like, that is wretched. Like, so stressful. So anything I can do to just break down the barriers and just educate is super exciting to me, because I'm like, if I can do anything to help your pre-planning be less stressful, and then stuff I can do on the wedding day to make your day less stressful and just help you get what you want, just excites me. So, but with that being said too, the biggest way that people learn from me is they either come work for me as a freelancer. The second way is that I could do one-on-one sessions with people. I don't really promote that, but if they reach out to me, I have that kind of set up as a back-end page on my website saying, this is what I can help you with, this is what I can walk you through. And I know a lot of people have been helped through that.
And with the podcast, is it going to be audio? Is it going to be video?
It'll be audio and video.
Audio
I'm
and
a
video.
videographer.
Do you have a working title?
No. You got one for me?
I mean, I would just go with the Craig Flood Show. But that's just like the by default because of the name of the show that I ended up choosing, which I think is like a common practice. Somebody takes their name, the name show. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I bet there's a lot of clever alliteration that you could kind of incorporate, like the wedding you wish you had show, sort of.
Yeah.
You know, just kind of a little play on words.
I think that it's funny, like part of
wedding you
me,
wish
like
you
literally
had.
I was taking a shower this morning. I was thinking about those things. And I'm just like, and I'll put some energy into them, but I'm happy just getting on and just like making the content, and I'll figure out some of that stuff later.
Cool.
And the only reason I say that is because I just want to start doing, and then I'll figure that. I
Iterate.
don't want any roadblocks to hit me up,
Yes.
and if I can't figure it out yet, I'm just going to jump over it and keep moving.
I'm very familiar with roadblocks.
Oh my gosh.
For people who want to see your work, get little tidbits, little fun facts that you share on Instagram, and maybe want to connect with you and work with you or hire you, like how would they do that?
If it's a wedding inquiry, watertownfilms.com, at Watertown Films for Instagram or anything social. If it's a commercial inquiry, they can go to lodgepole.tv, so LODGEPOLE.tv. They can inquire there for any kind of commercial work.
Awesome. And any lasting words of wisdom or any, I don't know, fun stories you want to share before we break out?
No, the only thing I'll say is like, you and I were talking about this when we were rock climbing on Monday. I think, were we talking about this? Now my memory's faded. The connections you make lead to so much opportunity. We were a little bit, right? Yeah. So anyways, so the only thing I would just be thankful for is like looking back to that one time, and my memory's fuzzy, but somebody made an effort to talk to you. I either made an effort to talk to you, or you made an effort to talk to me
at the workshop,
and just
2012.
jumping over a hurdle, and now we're here having conversation. We've been friends for X years, and it's just really, I love just as time goes by to look back. It's like, wow, that's so funny. I'm still in a relationship with that guy. I'm still friends with that guy. Because you meet people and you bounce off, and it's always just fun looking back at So it's just fun. It's so funny that we met and now we're here. Fast forward, so much life has happened in between. We've grown our businesses, we've grown as humans, and now it's just fun to be here on a freaking podcast with you. So, anyways, cheers to that.
So be a good person.
Go say hi to the guy that looks interesting.
Thank you, Craig.
Yeah.
Appreciate you. I'm gonna turn off the podcast, but thank you everybody who tuned in, and I'll see you next time.
Hopefully it was valuable. Ta-ta.